Let me just check it. Yeah, no, it is.
Shall we see the ceiling?
Sorry? No, you can't see the ceiling.
No, we can.
I'm concentrating on the pin holder, didn't I? Yeah. Oh, let me just grab this. Oh, good morning, anyway.
Morning.
Welcome. Let me move this aside for a moment, a little bit. There we are. No, get that out of the way. Yeah. So, this morning we're going to have a little play with pin holders, which is really, pin holders I tend to think pin holders are great for when you want to do something at home and you just want to make something quick and where you have just a few flowers. You know, normally with the flower workshops the flower content is much greater and we look much more at like varied design, because let's face it, foam is just really easy. Yeah, you can stick anything in a piece of foam and it will stay put, whatever angle you stick it in at, and so it's just so straightforward. So why, then the sort of question is, why would you use one of these? Well, environmental side of things is one aspect, because obviously foam is not exactly environmentally friendly, and that includes the biofoam, by the way. Do not be fooled by biofoam. I don't know if you've come across that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's like Oasis, which is the main manufacturer. They've just produced the green foam, but they also have one, and it's called biofoam. And everything on that box makes it look like it's an environmentally friendly product. It makes absolutely that much difference to normal foam. The only thing is, they claim that it breaks down. But
in certain conditions, doesn't
in
it?
certain,
It's always the thing.
but that's all.
Yeah,
That's only in a laboratory situation.
Can you burn it?
Sorry.
Can you burn it?
Oh, yes, yeah, exactly. But that's just like burning plastic.
Yeah.
It's noxious.
So it's basically whatever you do with it, you're still left with nasty plastic.
No. I
So
just
the
wondered
fact that it breaks down,
dangerous.
it just breaks down into microplastics.
Yes,
So
exactly.
it's,
Yeah.
but because they can quote a few regulations, they are allowed to be able to say that it's biodegradable.
Okay.
And everybody understands under biodegradable that it just breaks down and it becomes non-harmful. But of course,
there's a difference between, and I don't know what they are, between biodegradable and compostable.
yeah.
There's a difference.
I think biodegradable basically in the grander sense means that it breaks down. So it breaks down from a solid into smaller pieces.
It can
Whereas-
take hundreds of years.
Just as
can't it?
dangerous.
And it's still plastic.
Yeah.
But a compostable obviously is something that is natural. It's all in the fine print, like with everything, you know, like you take out insurance and then find out you're not covered.
Yeah.
Because in the fine print it says, if you combed your hair that morning, that doesn't make, you know, that kind of thing. So it's the same old thing. So that's why this is become quite popular again. These are pin holders. This is something that's came from the Orient. Japan has made great use of these in ikebana, and that's a lot responsible for the style of flower arranging that the Japanese do. And the idea with this is that you basically, it's got lots of little nails, and you spike the materials on, and then you cover the pin holder with water. So in effect, the flowers are just sitting in water. And for example, a lot of flowers like clematis. Clematis is a beautiful flower. Cut flower in foam, it doesn't do well. And always what I say about foam is try and explain to people the difference between if you put a flower in water and a flower in foam. If you imagine, it's the same as if you drink a cup of water or if you drink a milkshake through a straw. Yeah, if you suck milkshake, like a thick milkshake through a straw, you have to suck a bit harder to get it into your mouth. Whereas pouring water in your mouth is straightforward. And that's the same with foam and water. So ultimately, like this little clematis should do much better in this because it's just in water. Right, so then the next thing is that the difference where the style of arranging, because you can sort of see, this has much more of an ikebana feel than this one here. This has more of a what we call a flower arrangement. And the reason why you see more that style done with this is because this is much more geared towards that than that. One of the ladies yesterday, she made an arrangement like this, beautiful arrangement, and it took her the full time of the workshop. Whereas, we were discussing it afterwards, and I was saying if you had a piece of foam, you'd have done that in a third of the time. And she said, yeah. So, yeah, this is a little bit more complicated in that sense. But because it does have certain limitations to an extent, but it works in a different way. The only way you can get proficient with these is by playing. So that's really why I started with a pinholder workshop last year with John, when he came over, and I want to do this one, and I want to do another one in the summer. It's really to encourage you to play about with them, so that you build up confidence on how to use them, and that ultimately you make use of it and it doesn't sit in the cupboard, because most of, like quite a few of you, have got pin holders from back in the 1970s, and since that time, there we go. See, yeah. Since that time, that's where a lot of them have stayed. So yeah, that's where this comes in really, really useful. So the way we use it is literally a dish which has some depth in it is good, because what you really want to do is you want to cover your pin holder fully with water. Okay, so just start with that, so that you've got a good base to work in. Still needs a bit more, I can still see the pin sticking out. And it's also in the way that we put the material on here, and I'll move that out of the way for a moment. I'll move it here. There we are. So, one of the main differences with working with this is that most of the materials you will spike straight down onto the pins. Yeah, and if you push them quite close to the pin, that is actually really useful. Yeah, because if you push it further up the stem and it buckles or breaks, then your fingers will get impaled on the. So if you feed it on there, literally.
On the stem, on the bit sticking up, do you put it all between them?
You just where it fits.
Oh,
So it might be between or it might be on the pin.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Good question.
Yeah. So yeah, but if you put it down, if you sort of feed it on, so say the top of my hand is the pins, if you feed it down just like you do with foam, so that you get it on there nice and securely, and then once it's fixed on there, if you then want to move it in a different position, you push it in that direction. Yeah? This is also something I learned, because to me, what my logic would have said was, if I want it in that way, then I push it down in that way. Okay, but I think what happens is it actually is quite difficult to do that, and you actually create more damage. Whereas when you push it down first and then push it over, what happens is. Sorry?
Is it actually on the pin?
Yeah. Then you're pinning it onto the next one.
Well,
So you're actually holding it in place. Whereas otherwise, the stem, if you push it, so if you push that down on the stems, it will stay, but more than likely, you're going to get your fingers.
Yeah. Can you show us again how you did it? Yeah.
So push it down,
Yeah.
and then if I wanted it at that angle, I push it
Oh.
over. Now it's
Well,
also
that's
useful, of
easy,
course,
isn't it?
because you can do a little bit of massage to assist with the angle you,
Okay.
in this case, with a leaf. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you push it down like that, you're just going to impale your finger on top of most of the pins. Plus, you'll probably split the stem.
Yes, squash it.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one thing. Now, the other thing is that, if you've come to workshops before, what I've always tried and taught you is that ideally you should cut things at a nice slanted cut, Yeah, but when you do that on here, that means that the surface area of the stem that you're using to spike it onto the pin holder is going to be minimal. You cut that down to its absolute minimum. So more than likely, the flowers will start to move. So in this case, it's much better. Still good to cut them with a knife, but cut them a little bit more horizontal. It doesn't have to be fully horizontal, but a little bit more. That way, when you push them on, they stay in place. So,
Have you told Johnny you're doing this today?
sorry?
Have you told Johnny you're doing this today?
No, I haven't. No. The other thing, and I'm going to say this to you, Shirley, is you need to clean that after you've used it.
Is that
No, because it will.
slight?
It will just. It
The
will.
question is how you actually get in there and clean it, because I've tried with mine and
If you get a toothbrush,
Oh,
it's basically just brushing between.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that you do it with something a little bit fairy liquid or something like that. Don't do it with bleach. Yeah,
No.
because even though it's metal, that bleach will
yeah.
bite in and start to mark the metal. But it's a really good idea. And I would also take the rubber off and clean under
I
there.
didn't know you could do that.
No, no, mate.
You know, the ring comes off. The reason why the rubber ring is on there is very, very simple, and that's to stop it slipping. You know, because when you take that off,
Just slide.
it slides everywhere. The rubber ring just gives it a good way of being kind of anti-slip.
I thought they put it in a dishwasher, perhaps it's not clean enough.
See, that gives it a rougher edge.
Dishwasher, couldn't it?
Sorry?
You could go in the dishwasher.
Yeah, again, I wouldn't do that.
No, okay.
No, because the chemicals in the cleaning
yeah.
agents,
Oh,
yeah, I don't think they're good for metal. You'll find that most cleaning things for metals are like quite abrasive, or like the ones that are okay, and like things like just very simple things like washing a bit of fairy liquid or
Okay.
something like that. So I'd use that. But that ring is there to stop it from.
Well, you know me, I'd cut myself on.
Yeah, but just do it gently. If you get a toothbrush,
Good idea, or a nail brush.
Get
Yeah.
someone to do it for
and
you.
just you know, you don't have to hold the toothbrush or whatever on. You just hold it by its thingy, yeah, and then just let it dry. But again, also take that off and give that a clean, because you can already see the build up on there, and
Yeah.
also on the inside of that rubber ring. So it's something you've got to.
Oh yes.
You can use it again and again and again and
I know
again, but
you
you
can
need to take
straighten
care
the
of it.
pins because you've got pins straight now, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you said we could borrow that to
Yeah,
straighten the pins.
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
okay.
Yeah, occasionally, for like today, we're going to use some branches, which are really, twigs are really nice to use in a pin holder. Yeah, obviously everything else is much easier because it's got a normal sort of like a cell-like stem, but the woody stems are the difficult ones. If you do find that you do bend the pins, which you may do by putting something heavy duty on there is this gizmo, but this gizmo costs about £7. So, yeah, rather than say to you, you'll need to buy one, yeah, I don't think unless, you know, you've worked out at the gym for the last 4 months and you've got, you know, you're like so butch that I can't see you bending all these pins. But you can use this as like a little tube. You may find that hubby in his toolbox has got something that does fairly much the same, but you can use this to straighten the pin if you need to. Okay? So,
You ought to go to the repair shop, he has things for bending pins and what
Yeah.
have you.
yeah, so, yeah, you could always like, oh, damsel in distress, my pinhole. Yeah, yeah. I'd do that if I could get away with it, but. So, yeah, and that's basically it. And for the rest, obviously, it's a case of keep the water clean. That's still the same as what you do with a foam arrangement. So refresh the water a little bit, and you know you can do that by just gently pouring the water out and just refilling it. So those are really the main points. Other than that, you have to structure when you put a lot of materials in. You have to think about where you're placing the materials on the pin holder, because if you're putting something like tall materials in the middle, or maybe a little bit back from the middle, that is where it has to go on the pin holder, because if you want to put so for example, if you put one material here and say that's your tallest material, I'm just using the leaf but if I want something behind there, I need to make sure I've got pins left behind there for the material that comes to the back. So you have to think a little bit more about how your stems go in. And that's a question of practice as well. It's not, you know, you'll find that sometimes you want to put something somewhere and you don't have the space available. And that will be a really good learning experience. Okay. I think, let me think, what other things can I impart as, there was something I was just thinking and then I've forgotten what it is.
It'll come back to you.
Are there any stems, hands, that wouldn't go into the pin, really?
Oh, there will, yeah,
Yeah.
because there's some,
I mean, they're
for
obviously
example,
very hard ones, but soft,
yeah, but they should all be okay.
they should be okay.
Yeah.
And how about grasses?
Yeah, there is the thing like fine material that, see, that doesn't,
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
but I'll get to that,
Ah.
so don't worry. I'll show you how to
Can
get
you
around
use-
that.
Can you use a pin holder for absolutely any material, or is there some that still does a lot better in foam?
No, there's nothing that will do better in foam.
Right, okay.
Every single cut flower and every material will always do better in water. Yeah, foam is a very useful mechanic, but it does, flowers in general struggle a bit, not, you know, it's not as, put it this way, it's a step down from being in water. So, the other thing, that's what I was going to say, the other reason why I said to you this size pin holder, because I'm sure if you've ever looked at pin holders, they come in
Yeah.
anything from that size,
yeah.
and that is really one of the largest ones you come across. The reason why I went for this large one is the main reason is because of the flexibility and the weight.
Yeah.
Because if I put a big branch in there, that's not even that big, but if I were to put that in there, that will stay put. If I've got a tiny little thing, it'll just topple.
Oh, I see, yes.
Okay, so there's a logic to,
Yeah.
yeah, because they are expensive, they're £26, and yeah, and if you bought them in the 70s, you'll be getting watery eyes because they didn't cost anywhere near that.
Well, they lasted well, didn't they?
Yeah, you got yours, I got one as well.
I've
Yeah.
got them too from my
Yeah.
granny, but I mean,
Yeah, I've got one, a tiny one, in a stone, and but it needs straightening. I went, oh, I want to bring it today, I forgot.
Well, there you go, see.
Yeah.
So,
Surprising
yeah,
what you've
but
got.
they, sorry?
It's surprising. I've got a dish with just one in, which is in the, you know,
Fixed.
pot like that.
Yeah.
You can make quite a. You don't just have. You can have one or two flowers, but you can. It's surprising how many you can get in.
Yeah. But mainly, if you get a lot of materials in, ideally they all have to sit like that. It's the trouble is when you do this,
Yeah.
because then you block some of the other pins away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the other thing about this is you can use this for 3 flowers and a leaf,
Yes.
but equally you can put a lot more material in. Yeah, there's no, so that's why this gives the most flexibility out of everything. So, there we are. So that's the whole background on the pin holder. So, we are going to start, and what I wanted to hopefully get you to do is first of all have a little play along the lines of what we have here. And it doesn't mean that you have to use the same materials, although probably what I would start with is your branch. Now, this also gives us, yeah, because this is a hardwood, this is magnolia, and it's quite hard. So how do you get that on there if it's too hard? Some things will go on there quite easily. This one and that thickness will not go that easily. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to decide how I use this branch. And, I mean, I could use it that way. I think maybe something like that, so I can get that. Yes, so really look at the shape and what does it do, and how can you make it look interesting. Yeah, because straightforward thing would be to put it upright, but that's a little bit boring. So, you know, I think we're going to put it on like that. And then I'm going to cut my branch already, so it has a flat base here. Now, I could try and push it down on there, but I think that's not, and it will stay, but that's only just, can you see that's only just, yeah, it's only just attached. So, what I'm going to do, there's lots of different ways you can do this. Is basically you make the stem smaller, and you can do that by cutting with a pair of secateurs, halfway splitting it, and then what you can even do is split it again, so that you've got now almost 4 small stems. Okay, and let's see how that works. Still really hard. Yeah, and it stays put, and if you're doing this at home, you might be able to get away with it, but if you just have that branch, it's not a problem. But when you start putting other materials in,
You get knocked.
and you not see, and that's where it goes. So, the next point is, what we can do is we can make the stem a little bit narrower.
We click down.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that we've
So
got,
the same
I've shaved it on
principle.
2 sides, and now that makes it smaller again. Let's have a look and see if we can.
Oh.
And now,
Yeah.
that's really secure. And you can see that went on much more easily.
Yes.
Okay,
It's common sense really, isn't it?
it is common sense. So now I want to see if I can bend it a little bit, so I want it more of an angle. There we are. Now it stays in place.
So the same principle goes straight down.
Almost, yeah. With the branch I went a little bit of an angle, because if you remember I cut it so that the bottom was flat to go on the pins.
Yeah, yeah.
So I put it in a little bit of an angle already,
Okay.
but I can still move it a little bit over
Yeah.
within reason. Okay. So let's have a look. We're going to have I'm going to have a quick little play and see. So I'm going to use my little hyacinth. I'm using a broken hyacinth. So first of all, actually, I'm going to use.
What's it? Is that the hedgerow?
No, this is pistache. This is a real florist material.
Oh, okay.
It sort of grows around the Mediterranean.
Oh.
But I had somebody didn't actually use this, but I actually think
Yeah.
these quirky
Yeah.
lines or these organic
Yeah.
shapes are
Yeah.
really
They're
quite
lovely.
cool. So have a
We've got some hedgerow like that, and I'm not sure what it's called. Shall we go and have a look?
Now you see I'm putting this one, you can see again slightly at the angle it's already in. Again, that's quite hard.
Have you got a sticking plaster?
I have got some.
Come on, need
You
some.
need a first aider.
I can scream really loud.
Have you got a first aider? I just wonder whether your daughter.
There's backup 6 miles away, inches
Yeah.
free. So even
See, I love the lines of those.
Yeah.
Things, they're
you
beautiful.
see, and that's what I'm saying. That's where this mechanic works really well, because with just a few materials, you can. In fact, I'm
But
going to
also when you picked up both of those branches, I thought they looked very unpromising, but you've angled them in such a way that makes it look really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just trying to find something interesting about the material rather than conforming it to doing something that you normally recognise. And that's the thing, you know, that's why I'm saying this is really good to play around with. And every time it will be different.
Yeah.
But that is the kind of fun about it. It's just, and it's a little bit just playing with it and just becoming a bit more confident. So, now there is another reason why, because I know it's called a spring flower arrangement, and chrysanthemums aren't exactly the most spring-like flower, but I wanted to have the ranunculus last quite well, and then the ones I've chosen last quite well. You know, things like daffodils and irises don't really last that long, so I thought, well, I'm sure after you've made something, you'd like to keep it longer than a couple of days.
Oh,
So-
we just have.
Like to get our money's worth.
Oh, exactly, that I see, I know, yeah.
Chris and Daphne have only just thrown their
Amaryllis out.
arrangements out.
I've
They
still
really
got,
had them.
I've still got my wreath. I'm reluctant to deconstruct it.
Oh, yeah, don't.
Oh, don't worry, I'll get mine to the next year. I put it in a plastic
She's
bag.
got business.
Excuse me, like, it's not exactly positive PR, man.
And my friend took it down to Kent and she used it again in church and sprayed it or what have you.
If I ever need a PR lady, I know I'm not knocking on your door.
You'll be
I
putting
know,
your
I
own
know.
business. You only need one wreath to last a lifetime.
Yeah.
I never read.
So, yeah, just getting back to this for a moment. So we've got those materials there, and I'm just going to add this flat steel.
You can always learn every time you come here. I've been coming for about 20 years, so that, even though I think that,
I'm just going to push that back over.
Right.
And really, I'd be more than happy to leave that at that point.
it's lovely.
So, it's very, very simple.
Few twigs. Yeah.
Then you could play around with it, and I'm sure I can
You
improve
can
it.
buy one expensive flower and do something with it.
Yeah, or two, if you
Yeah.
have two
If you go
to
to a,
ranunculus, or
Yeah.
and that's a nice thing. That's a good way to challenge yourself. What I think this way of working is really good for is, for example, you've got a friend coming around for coffee, or you've got somebody coming over at the weekend, and you want to
Yeah.
you just want to have something on the table,
yeah,
and you don't want to have to make a whole arrangement.
No.
Yeah? Like I suppose many of you come to the workshops because you learn something, but also you have something nice to show for it.
yeah,
Yeah.
But unfortunately, life doesn't really work along with my schedule.
yeah.
And sometimes you have friends who drop in for a coffee and you think, oh, it'd be nice to have some flowers on the table. And wouldn't it be nice just to take 2 stems? And that's a good way to challenge yourself as well. If you're lucky enough, most of you have gardens, or if you live in town, if you go for a walk, there's enough stuff that comes over over walls everywhere. And the thing is with this, you don't need, like in a big flower arrangement, you'd have a bin bag. With this, it's the kind of thing where you can maybe pick 3 bits of greenery along the way.
I like the grasses and things like that. Well, I don't live in the country, but
Yeah,
just
exactly.
pick them and make them. Yeah.
But that's why this
It's
mechanic is
beautiful.
so useful. So, that I think is
That is really lovely.
a really fun way to go about it. So, yeah, are you happy with that? So have a little play with it, just see what appeals to you, but I would limit it first of all. So I would like you to make one design with just ideally, say, a max of 5 or 6 materials.
Is there anything we should know about the delicate stems?
Not really,
No,
but what I'm
I
going to
still
do,
go to
because I'm going to take this one apart and I'm going to show
Okay.
you there. I think I might keep that one. So, because the branch, I'd like you to do something interesting with it. It's nice. They've all got weird shapes. This is magnolia. It's very expensive. It comes from Italy. It's marketed.
Will they come out?
Sorry.
Will they come out?
Well, this is I've never bought it because it's
Okay.
extortionate.
We go in the gardens.
Is the simple.
Well, they're stinky now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have enough. My sister, my sister has a magnolia bush, but it isn't. I don't think she'd be very happy if I chopped 20 pieces
Yeah.
of
tree is
23 pieces of branches off. I don't think she'd have much
You
left.
just send us out one at a time
Yeah.
to do this.
She'll never miss it like that.
So, it'd be interesting to see if it comes out. But anyway, if it does, it's pink.
Does
And if it doesn't,
occasionally, if you got it from the garden, it will, depending on how the
Quickly
buds
you
are
get
when
it.
you actually pick
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
But the buds, if they're quite like that,
yeah, but even
they
the
will
buds on
last,
the
they will last, or they don't drop off. Mine
Hmm.
hasn't, from about 2 years ago I did a wreath thing with it. And they're still on there, the buds.
Really?
If you get it early enough, I think it's like pussy willow, if it's early enough,
Okay.
um,
What's that you're putting in?
this is rosemary.
Yeah,
So
I
I'll
thought
quickly
it
go
was.
through what you've got so you actually know. Sorry, I should have done that before.
I thought it was, but
You got
I can't see you as well today.
You've got some black pebbles, and the pebbles you can take home. You don't need to use them necessarily, but they're quite useful. Yeah, the thing to remember is that even though when you're working you'll see that pin holder all the time, even if you don't cover the pin holder and it's still a little bit visible, yeah, most of you probably can't really see that pin holder in there.
No.
No.
Yeah, and it's only got one branch in it. So, and quite often the surface of the water being reflective almost hides it. But you know, sometimes it's useful if you've got the space that you have some of these. So yeah, you can always take those home. I've got some little bags for you.
With some of the Kens and them hands, is the principle that you should not be able to see it and disguise it, or is it just, you know, you can see
No,
it,
it's-
it doesn't matter?
Everybody's different.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think once you get used to it, I don't think it'll bother you.
no,
But we've all grown up with foam,
yes.
mechanic,
Seeing.
cover it.
Yes, yeah.
So,
Oh, I see.
yeah. So you've got two ranunculus, violin, this variety is called. You've got two anemones, this is Galil blue. Then you've got one clematis blue pirouette, and you've got two Astrantia billion stars, and then you've got one chrysanthemum, this is a new variety by the way, called Typhoon, and you've got one hyacinth fondant, and then you've got your magnolia branch, and you've got pistache, which is this one,
It's lovely.
and you've got one fatsia, they call this mignon, this means extra small, and you've got two garlic leaves,
Oh, okay.
and you've got some variegated china grass, and you've got some lime green conifer, and some rosemary. Okay. So, I'm just going to have a little play. So I'm going to follow, with this one, I'm going to follow the line of the magnolia. I really want that branch to show itself off, so that I leave the character of the branch untouched, but I like that angle, so I'm going to keep hold of that. And then I'm going to use my ranunculus
I
to
can
get
never
the-
grow those in the garden.
Yeah, it's a shame. Ranunculus are what I've
They're
such
really
a
hard to grow.
such a shame, because ranunculus flowers are beautiful.
They are.
Yeah.
And they do last pretty well in water, I have to say. In foam, they can be a bit more of a pain, but they're beautiful to use. But it's like now you get the clone varieties, which are the really big-headed ones. But the price of them is just like, well, in the shops you pay like $3.50 a stem. And it's just like,
I'd be more respectful of the few that I've got in the garden.
yeah, it's just really, really expensive stuff. But hey, that's the way it goes. So I'm just going to quickly put some, make something. So I'm not really,
Don't forget you've only got to use half a dozen pieces.
no, I'm doing where I'm using much more of the flour.
Okay.
With this one, a little bit more like that, just to show you, if you want to, you may think like, well, I've got all these flowers and I want to use them. But it will just give you a little bit of an,
I mean, we'll have lots of flowers for the toilet this week.
exactly. So you can see that these ranunculus are already a bit of a pain, because they're moving, because there's the surface area, can you see?
Yeah.
In which case, because they also split more easily. Come on. There we are. That's, so, I'll just wiggle that round, so you can see
That's lovely.
how that's coming along.
It's a nice dark colour.
Mm.
And keep grouped together. You can see that fancier leaf is still, just take that out a little bit. And that's a little further down. The astrantia is that all the stems are a little bit different, and some of these are a bit wild. You can see in there, which makes it just a little bit messy. So I'm going to cut these down to smaller pieces. And then the clematis I'm going to cut in 2 pieces. So I'm going to take the top out. So I've got 2 separate stems. Now, you see, this is where the, oh, actually, that's surprisingly, I found I was going to say, this is the pain in the backside one, and it's not going to work, but of course,
It did.
that's always the way it works when you try and explain something. I think, oh, this is a good example. That's where things like the astrantia, because it's got a slightly hollow stem, and also the chrysanthemum come in. And chrysanthemum is quite a useful one. To take a small piece, and it's got like that sort of very spongy centre in it. I'll show quickly at home for. Is that still running, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh, good. If you're wondering why everybody at home, I videoed yesterday morning's lesson, I videoed yesterday evening's lesson, and the video cut out halfway through for technical issues. So, that little stem will allow you to put a thin stem through it. You see, like that. And now you've got something that you can spike onto the pin holder, but that holds a very thin material. So for example, like little grasses, really thin grasses, and also galaxy leaves with really thin stems that don't. Yeah, so with this one, I'm just going to spike the chrysanthemum stem loosely onto the, yeah, because it's not supporting any weight, it's just holding my clematis in place. And I'm just making this slightly free form, just quickly, so I'm not. And I think this does take more time in general, doing quite a sort of filled arrangements like this, as opposed to a more minimal.
Yeah.
But then at least you have the choice of what you want to do. Same with the galax leaf. I'm going to do the same with that one. Give it a little bit of stem. So that. And you can see how that is coming along. But I would heartily agree that this kind of thing, I would, in a heartbeat, I would do this kind of arrangement. Much prefer to do it in foam,
Yeah.
because it would be so much more simple. But it's good to give it a go.
But if it works and it's saving on foam,
It is, yeah.
and like you don't have to get to have it of anything.
And if you have this mechanic at home
Yeah.
anyway, see, and I've just filled that in a little bit there with some pistache, and that kind of gets rid of the pin holder, because in this kind of design, I think the pin holder actually is a little bit distracting. Now, other things like the grass, for example, China grass, is not the easiest thing to add because of that will just fall between the pins. But what you can do, and of course you can, if you use the back of your knife, you can curve this a little bit more just by gently rolling it on the knife. You can use other little ways and means, because if you use a little bit of wire, just using a really thin wire, and make a little U-pin at the bottom of the grass, and sort of squish it together a bit, you almost roll it into a curl, and that will effectively almost give it, turn it into a stem. Yeah, and just for you at home, next time, just by pulling it together and wrapping it with wire, instead of being that profile, it folds into a circular profile. So I'm just almost making a stem.
Okay.
So now, that should, and it's very lightweight, so it can sit there
Very effective.
however it wants.
Yes.
Yeah, little bits of grass like that, they're just very decorative, so they work really well. Yeah. So, I mean, I could put more and more in. That one. And of course, if you're doing this at home, then the really lightweight things like this clematis now, I've just hooked it onto a pin at the front there and it's fine. Yeah, so really your taller materials are the ones that really do need good security. But if you're not moving it about, yeah, and even you could get away with, for example, if you want a material just to, providing that you make sure it is in water, you can lay material
Okay.
on there. It doesn't need to go in the pin as long as it's in water, but then you need to make sure your water level is a little bit high. But you can see that the dish here, also you have to facilitate the water, so there is a little gap. So you have to make, don't cut your materials too short is what I'm saying, to start with, because what you'll find is that you're starting then to work inside the dish, and the water, almost where the water level comes up to the flowers, the base flowers, and then they'll rot. Are you ready to have a go?
Yes.
Yeah, so have a play. So, yeah, well, I'd say try and limit it to maximum of 5 materials first of all. And then afterwards, unless you can add to it or maybe start again.
Yeah, but it's all bad. I think I need a bit of sticky on mine. That's what I